So we had a little complication there. I apologize. So what I was saying was before Marshall, the legislative and executive branches seemed to have all the power, and the tiny little Supreme Court had none. But because of what John Marshall did with the judicial review, effectively saying, hey guys, Supreme Court has a ton of power because we can actually decide the laws passed by Congress and signed by the president, whether they're constitutional or not. So you may look at this and say, whoa, look at that. Who just appeared in this picture? Well, that, my friends, is Alexander Hamilton. That is the Federalist Godfather, who is actually going to die just a few years into Marshall's term as Chief Justice. But he's effectively speaking into the ear of Marshall, as you can see. And so Marshall's decisions are going to be influenced by the fact that he's a Federalist. And even though the Federalists will really, truly, truly die, I mean, they're sort of dead and then they sort of get resurrected as a result of how badly the War of 1812 is going for the Democratic Republicans. But then when they bring their demands for the Hartford Convention, at the end of the war, they look really unpatriotic and the party really dies. I mean, that's 1815. John Marshall's going to live on as the Chief Justice for 20 more years. And his decisions really are Hamiltonian. They value the federal government over the states. So the whole idea of judicial review is giving the federal government a ton of power over states. Because remember, Jefferson and Madison had argued in the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions that states under compact theory had the power to rule whether a congressional law was constitutional or not. Well, Marshall says that's ridiculous. It's the federal government, namely the Supreme Court, that has that power, effectively taking away states' rights. Well, he's going to continue to take away states' rights while at the same time really giving priority to the idea of a strong sort of nationalist economy over the 3+ decades that he's in office. So he's going to be a thorn in Jefferson's side, which is ironic because he's Jefferson's cousin. He's going to be a thorn in Madison's side, Monroe's side. Not necessarily John Quincy Adams, and you'll see because John Quincy Adams is sort of got some ideas like Marshall, but even in the side of Andrew Jackson in the early 1830s. So the really important part to remember about Marbury versus Madison is judicial review. Supreme Court has the power to determine any law passed by Congress unconstitutional. Okay. Now we find ourselves with perhaps the bigger issue, at least in terms of land. And that is the Louisiana Purchase, 1803, same year as Marbury versus Madison. So let's set the table for what's going on. If you look, the United States land up until 1803 went from the Atlantic Ocean to the Mississippi River. We know that as a result of the Treaty of Paris, 1783, the land goes to Mississippi. Now, the land to the west of the Mississippi was owned by Spain. We recall this, hopefully. Okay. Now, we also should recall that there was a treaty during the 1790s called Pinckney's Treaty, and that came after Jay's Treaty. And remember, Jay's Treaty looked to many people, including Spain, like America was getting back in bed with the British. And Spain was concerned because if we're back in bed with the British, what would that mean for all of the Spanish land that is right next to American land? So not only did they give us some land from Spanish Florida, not only did they promise that they would try to keep Native Americans from sort of going up into Georgia and also making it so that runaway slaves couldn't run from Georgia into Spanish Florida, they also made a concession. And this is going to sound a little confusing, but it's very, very important. Okay. It's called the right of deposit. So not only could Americans send their goods down the Mississippi to New Orleans, which is really important if you are a farmer, because again, you're not going to send it to the East Coast going east. You got to send it down the Mississippi, out the Gulf of Mexico, up and around the Atlantic coast. But the right of deposit meant that you could leave effectively your agricultural goods in New Orleans until a ship came and got them, because there's not always ships just waiting there for the goods. So the right to use the Mississippi and the right of deposit are really, really important. And Spain had given that concession, so everything seemed good. And then there's a change. France now has New Orleans and this land. And it happened through sort of a secret diplomatic treaty between France and Spain. But now this is concerning. Whereas Spain, not very threatening, France is a problem. If France has this land, and particularly has New Orleans, a very important port for sending goods down the Mississippi, what does that mean for farmers? What does that mean for even the potential for war if we have to fight over this? Now, this is important to consider. Jefferson was a Francophile. Remember, during the 1790s, the guy's all pro France. He lived in France, he'd been the ambassador to France. But he knows that this is really, really concerning because his people, his dirty, dusty farmers, are the ones that need to send their goods down the Mississippi to New Orleans and have the right of deposit. So he finds himself in quite a pickle. He's like, "Oh my gosh, what do I do? If I try to get it back from France, that could be tough because I might have to fight France. And if I have to fight France, then I got to get in bed with the British, who I really don't want to do. And on top of that, remember, I reduced the size of the Army and the Navy so much that we don't really have a military. So not only would I have to fight France, which again, a war, thank you, Ethan Renda, might, endanger the Republican experiment, but in doing so, I'd have to probably get in bed with the British. So that whole war idea is a terrible idea. But if I do nothing, then my farmers who need New Orleans and need the Mississippi, they're screwed. Okay. Here's my plan. Let's offer to buy New Orleans. That's what we'll do. Okay, we'll offer to buy New Orleans. So what's crazy here is that Napoleon's actually really amenable to the plan. Okay, and you're like, why would Napoleon be so agreeable to giving it up? Well, Napoleon had acquired this land so that he could have grain growing area to have food to give to all of the people, namely slaves, but also their French overseers in Santo Domingo, Haiti, where he was trying to build a sugar empire. But a slave, Toussaint L'Ouverture, known as the slave who freed Haiti, basically scuttled those plans. And so Napoleon no longer needed the food to feed the people, creating a sugar empire because he was no longer going to have a sugar empire. And also, the French suddenly found themselves back at war with the British again. So Napoleon's like, I could use some cash fast. So I no longer need the land. Also, I'm trying to, turn it into some money here. Okay. So Jefferson's faced with a problem here because he had really only okayed the purchase of New Orleans, which he found to be okay. But now all of this land, which is coming at a ridiculously cheap price, 15 million for almost a million square miles. 15 million is about 250 million in today's money. I mean, you can't even fathom about what an amazing deal it is. But we gotta look at TJ's dilemma. Okay, first he had the dilemma like, if I do nothing, you know, then I'm going to piss off my farmers. If I do something, I may end up in war. But his new dilemma is a constitutional one. He's being given the chance to buy all of this land, but nowhere in the Constitution does it say that he can buy all of this land. And remember, he's a strict constructionist. He interprets the Constitution literally. Like if it's not in there, he can't do it. I mean, that's the way he dealt with the bank, back when he was arguing with Hamilton over BOTUS. And so he's like, I don't think I can do it. Let me find a way. And his advisors are like, dude, you got to get over this. Like, this is the most amazing deal ever. And plus, it's going to benefit our people, the dirty, dusty farmers. Like, are you really going to not do it because it's not in the Constitution? He's like, well, can I get like an amendment passed? Can we like change the Constitution that gives the federal government the right to buy all this territory from other countries? They're like, we don't have enough time. Like Napoleon could change his mind. So in the end, that strict constructionist gets a little looser. Okay. They say, you know what, under the treaty making powers of Congress, this can be done. So you say to yourself, wait a second, did Jefferson just commit the greatest betrayal of his beliefs? Or is it simply that the party in power, the Federalists of the 1790s, the Democratic Republicans of the 1800s, that they need loose construction to sort of keep their power? So is it not that like the Federalists will always be loose constructionists and Democratic Republicans will always be strict constructionists? Is it simply that the party in power wants to be loose and the party out of power wants to be strict? So you got to think about it in that way. You can either say Jefferson's the greatest hypocrite in the world, or you can say, no, 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 no. Jefferson is simply doing what presidents in power do, which is to try to keep power for their federal government. So either way you look at it, Jefferson did flip and switch his interpretation, but he may not be a hypocrite so much as just sort of following a presidential legacy. Now, it's important to realize that Hamilton and the Federalists are pissed. They're like, it's not in the Constitution. It's not in the Constitution, which is so ironic because remember, way back Hamilton, when the bank was just like, it doesn't need to be in the Constitution. It's necessary and proper. So there was a newspaper article written by Hamilton right at the time that's called the sour grapes argument. And again, if you know anything about sort of like fables back in the day, a sour grapes argument is essentially equivalent to what we call a pity party. You're just trying to basically be like, that's bad and I don't like it, and sort of pointing out all of the problems. So if we were in class, we would go through every single word here, but I just want you to get this idea of what Hamilton is doing at this time. He's doing his best to undermine Jefferson because he doesn't want Jefferson to get all the credit, because if Jefferson gets all this credit for the Louisiana Purchase, then the Democratic Republicans look even better and his party, the Federalists, look even worse. And the writing is already on the wall that the Federalists are going to be dead soon. Maybe the writing's on the wall that Hamilton's going to be dead soon, but he is. Spoiler alert, okay? So basically Hamilton's like, TJ's going to get all the credit, but come on, it's all luck. There was nothing wise or shrewd on his part. So you could actually read Hamilton's words. I think it's instructive if you do, but I'm not going to go through every word. Okay. So he's like, come on, guys, just like realize, like Jefferson didn't do anything special. And then he goes through this whole sort of diplomatic analysis of like what Napoleon was trying to do and how he couldn't do it. And again, he just keeps saying, Jefferson, right man, right time, totally lucky. Any idiot could have done it. So he's like, listen, France wanted a sugar empire in Haiti. Okay. That's why the Louisiana Territory was so important. But the climate and that really, revolutionary slave, Toussaint Louverture, he made France's reality one where like Haiti doesn't work as a sugar empire, so they don't need the sugar, the food growing land in, continental North America. And he's like, and on top of that, France is more concerned with fighting for England. So remember, Jefferson, not a great dude, just really lucky. Anybody could have done it. And then he sort of tries to break down Napoleon's thinking just about New Orleans itself. He goes, listen, okay, Napoleon knew that if he hung on to New Orleans and he was fighting Britain, Britain would have totally taken New Orleans, okay? So Napoleon was smart, and that he gave up New Orleans so that America would have it, so that Britain couldn't have it. All right. Again, trying to make sure that Jefferson doesn't give credit. If anything, give the credit to Napoleon for getting rid of it, at the right time. And then he basically says, listen, in case you're not getting what I'm saying, Napoleon had to. Okay. He was desperate. He couldn't hang on to it any longer. Jefferson couldn't screw this up no matter how hard he tried. Stop giving Jefferson and the Democratic Republicans credit. Then he goes, and again, like, why are people so excited about all this land? Like, probably at the end of the day, all this land is going to be a problem. It's really just New Orleans that's special. So he's going to concede that New Orleans is important, but he just doesn't want Jefferson to get all this credit for all this new land. So at the end of the day, this pity party sour grapes argument is designed to try to temper the excitement for what Jefferson and his party have done, and really try to make sure that you understand that idiot could have done it. Well, in the end, it's sort of hard to dismiss the idea that America has now, taken on all of this new land that is going to be really good for farming, and that obviously is going to put the Federalists, in a really, really tough position, because it's hard to sort of be this Northeastern business party at a time where the country is growing so much, not in the Northeast, and is clearly about farming. So this is something that most history books don't bring up, but I can feel compelled to do it. There's a group of Federalists who are just so paranoid. They're like, our party is not going to survive. We can't just go around writing like, sour grapes articles. We got to do something about it. So it's an idea of Canada and New England and New Jersey and New York. Okay. If you like looked at an entire map, this would just be like the northeastern part of the United States plus Canada. And there was a group of like really radical Federalists that were called the Essex Junto. And they proposed actually seceding, like breaking away from the United States. And they were going to call it the Northern Confederacy. And the reason I bring this up is we talk about secession like way off in the future, like the Civil War. South Carolina does it in 1860, and then the rest of the Confederacy does it in like 1861. But way back in the early 1800s, there was a group of Federalists who are like, why do we want to be part of this country? It's going to be this like Democratic Republican, like farmer paradise that we don't belong to. So let's form our own country. And they're like, we know the guy to talk to, Alexander Hamilton. He's the Federalist godfather. He'll definitely support us. And Hamilton's like, guys, like, I'm a Federalist, but I'm not going to betray my country. So he says no. So then they go to another guy. You may have heard of him. They go to Aaron Burr. And Aaron Burr, who happens to be the vice president of the United States at the time, he's like, oh, yeah, I might be interested. Okay. So the play Hamilton doesn't go into this. But the reality is, what ultimately leads to the duel between Burr and Hamilton that kills Hamilton has to do with their disagreement over this. And again, it's such sort of a weird plot that it's hard to really figure out how Lin-Manuel Miranda and all his genius would sort of fit it in. But I did want you to understand that part. So that's where I'm going to end right now. Okay, we talked about Marbury versus Madison. At the end of the day, I know there's M and M and M, but it's really about giving the Supreme Court power through judicial review. And then the Louisiana Purchase is so important, not just in terms of all the land that the United States received, but really the dilemma that Jefferson went through, which is, do I act and have to take on France and maybe get in bed with the British and then go to war? Or, do I not do that and risk really pissing off all of my political base? And then the next dilemma was when he actually got this sweet deal offered to him by Napoleon, could he actually do it? Like, was it in the Constitution, or was he going to have to sort of look past his earlier strict interpretation tendencies to get it done? All right. So that's the first installment of our asynchronous day lectures.